On December 6, 1991, Frank and his wife Barbara Sirachi lived at this house right here with her two children, Jennifer and Sarah Harbison.
They had a big night planned. That was a Friday night, and Jennifer was going to work with her best friend at a local yogurt shop. Her sister Sarah was going out with her best friend on the town, hitting up the mall, and then hanging out with her sister at the yogurt shop. Then they were going to all come back here and have a sleepover. However, none of the girls made it back. They were all brutally murdered at the yogurt shop, and this crime hasn't been solved almost 3 decades later. We're going to get into the story, take you around to the spots, and we cordially invite you to come along.
Jennifer's best friend at the time was 13-year-old Amy Ayers. They didn't get to see each other much though, because Amy was in middle school.
While Sarah was, of course, in the high school. But on this day, Friday, December 6, 1991, they had big plans. They were finally going to get to have an evening together, a sleepover. Sarah's room and Jennifer's rooms were the upstairs rooms here at the house. They had their whole private area of the house. They absolutely loved country music, so there were George Strait posters, who was their favorite, all over the walls upstairs here at the house. The sleepover was going to be so much fun. They were going to listen to their country music. They were going to hang out. Plus, Amy and Sarah were having an opportunity to go out to the local mall all by themselves. They'd never done it before. It had always been parents or sisters, brothers involved in it and coming with them. But this time, they were going all on their own, and they were going to get a ride with Sarah's sister, Jennifer, because Jennifer had gotten a Chevy S10 pickup truck that her dad bought for her. The deal was she had to pay some of the bills on it, and she had to give her sister a ride. That wasn't a problem because they got along very, very well. The girls' rooms didn't change at all in the months or perhaps even years following the murders. It's like they froze in time on that December night. Pictures of the girls and their friends. A Nancy Drew book open to page 94. Clothes neatly folded, still in the laundry baskets. Homework never completed. A piggy bank. Balloons from Sarah's birthday. Basketball and cheerleading trophies from their time at Lanier High School.
We're at Navarro High School, which was formerly known as Lanier High School, where the 3 older girls attended school.
Jennifer and Eliza were both nominated for FFA Queen their senior year here. It was kind of a fun competition they were having between each other to see who might win that title. Eliza was also very mechanically inclined. She took part in the school's welding classes and also small engine repair classes. She did a lot of work on her own car, which was a 1971 bright green Volkswagen that she loved. Other people found it to be a bit on the ugly side. But actually for Christmas in 1991, she had asked for a bunch of parts so she could do some more work on that vehicle. She never got the chance to work on the vehicle again. On the day of the murders, the 3 girls attended school here, excitedly waiting for their big night out together. The night of the murders. Sarah comes home from school, spends the afternoon here at the house getting excited, getting ready for the night. Jennifer was out with her boyfriend for a couple hours at his apartment. Then she comes home, gets her proper clothing on for her night of work at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop here in town, where she works with her best friend, a girl by the name of Eliza Thomas. So she comes back here about 7 o'clock that evening to pick up her sister Sarah. The 2 of them get into the car and take off for the local mall. The mall was just a short ride from their house.
We are in the location where the old North Cross Mall used to be located. The girls really enjoyed hanging out and spending time at the mall. On December 6th, Jennifer dropped the girls off shortly before 8 p.m. and then headed into work.
The girls would have loved their time here. Of course, we told you earlier, it's their first chance to be here on their own without supervision. There was a movie theater here, an ice skating rink, all kinds of things. This was a very popular spot for local teenagers. The girls spent about an hour hanging out with other friends at the mall.
We're at Beauty Bar and Lounge. It used to be known as I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. Jennifer left here at around 9 o'clock to go pick up the girls about a half a mile down the road and bring them back here from the mall.
They would have gotten back here then just after 9 o'clock. The girls obviously had some money from some parents. They were having a great time that night. It was just a fun night to hang out. So they decided to walk on down the strip mall just a little bit to the only other store that was open around here. There's a place called Mr. Getty's Pizza right over there. They got down there, grabbed a pizza, and then walked back on over here to the yogurt shop with it. Investigators later found the pizza box in the back of the yogurt store.
At around 9:30 p.m., Eliza's mom, Maria, stopped by to get a treat. She said that it was quiet and nobody else was around.
Shortly after she got here, sometime between that time and 10 o'clock, a man by the name of Durrell Croft stopped by here. He was a former military police officer and he owned a security company. So he was driving in a security vehicle which had some lights on it. He said there were two couples in the shop, younger couples, and there was one lone guy. This guy had a deep voice and a large nose. Croft says he seemed very fidgety. He seemed nervous. He didn't really want to talk to him. He noticed the lights on the car. He went up and ordered only a soft drink. He took his soft drink and went toward the back of the shop where the bathroom area was. Now hold on to that piece of information because we're going to circle back to that a little bit later. Croft later told investigators the young man was wearing a green jacket, one you might find at a military surplus store.
At 10:42, the final purchase was made and recorded on the cash register. It came from a couple that came here after watching a movie and wanted a treat.
They were here for just about 5 minutes. They said there were only two other people in the store. They didn't see the two younger girls besides the other two workers. Now, the two people were two men sitting at the very front table closest to the cash register. They said they didn't get a great look at him, but one was larger, maybe a little more muscular. The other guy was skinnier. They both were wearing jackets or sweatshirts of some sort. The couple left the store around 10:47 p.m. and said the girls were wiping down tables, filling up the napkin holders, and placing chairs on the tables when they left. When police arrived, only the table where the couple had seen the two men had not been cleaned, and it was also the only table where the napkin holder hadn't been filled and a chair had not been placed on top of the table. You can see that table in this picture.
At 11:03, a final transaction was made on Eliza's register, reading no sale.
This is probably the moment where the murderers took money out of the cash register. They took a total of $540 from the shop.
Police would later wonder, was it a robbery gone wrong, or did the murderers simply take the money because it was readily available to them? Just before midnight, an officer by the name of Troy Gay was out on patrol and saw smoke coming from the yogurt shop. He called in the fire department, who immediately went up to the front door and found it was locked. The assumption is the girls had turned the open sign to closed on the front door and locked it when the couple left, leaving the two guys at the table in the front. They would have planned to let the men out when they finished up and lock the door again, something the business allowed them to do. Instead, firefighters were forced to use a crowbar to open the door and went in with their hoses, spraying hundreds of gallons of water all over the place to put the fire out. In the process, most of the evidence in the case was destroyed. Eventually, they began to find the bodies of the girls and called for a homicide detective. Sergeant John Jones Jr. was the only homicide detective working that night.
It just so happened that a ride-along was happening with him. A local CBS station was riding along with Jones on the night of the murders. They were having a very boring night, and apparently Jones had even joked with them that they might find more excitement in a different city. This was part of a local series where they followed around homicide detectives in various different cities throughout Texas.
When Jones got the call, the firefighters only had found 3 of the girls. When the police arrived, they found this back door right here open.
It was propped open with something they wouldn't release. What was holding the door open? They were trying to hold that back for the false confessions to see if people knew some of this information that wasn't released out into the public. Now, right inside of here is where 3 of the bodies were found. Right to the right, inside here.
The 3 were stacked up on top of each other by the back door. Several minutes later, they found Amy Ayers by herself several feet away from the other girls. Amy apparently lived longer than the other 3 and was able to crawl away before dying.
Of course, the idea of this being propped open brings us back to what Croft said. The off-duty security officer said that he saw that young man with the large nose and the deep voice come back to the back and disappear back there, and then he never saw him again after that. He may have been one of the 2 men sitting at the front booth. Neither of them have ever been identified.
By the time midnight rolled around, Frank and Barbara were in bed. Barbara said that she didn't really stay up and worry too much about her kids.
The other thing was that the kids had the animals that they went and checked on twice a day. It was at an off-campus site for the school. So they would check on them once in the morning and once in the evening. They figured they'd probably gone to check on the animals. So there was no concern when they went to sleep. The concern started, of course, this was sometime a little bit after 3 o'clock in the morning when police showed up at the door here with the terrible news.
Imagine the horror Frank and Barbara went through being woken up by police after midnight and being told their 2 children were brutally murdered and set on fire at a normally peaceful hangout spot for the folks in the community. Just 8 days after the murders, Maurice Pierce was apprehended here at the North Cross Mall.
He was illegally carrying a .22 caliber pistol. That was the same caliber that was used in the murder of the girls. He also had multiple rounds in his pocket. Now, he immediately starts throwing his buddy under the bus, who was also arrested with him. This is a guy by the name of Forrest Welborn. He said that Welborn had borrowed the gun from him, and that was the gun that was used in the murder of the girls. Pierce had been hanging out with 3 friends at the mall on the night of the murders. They were Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Forrest Welborn. However, when police later examined the gun, they couldn't get a match to the murder weapon. Also, hair and fingerprints from the scene did not match any of the 4. Investigators dropped them down on the list of suspects. Years went by without any arrest in the case. Then eventually new detectives took over, and 4 arrests of familiar names was made. Maurice Pierce, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Forrest Welborn were all arrested in 1999 for the murders. Turns out Springsteen had confessed to police to killing and raping one of the girls, while Scott had also confessed to the killings. It seemed the police had found the killers. Police assumed it was a robbery gone wrong that had led to the murders of the girls. The thought was Pierce, Springsteen, and Scott had gone into the store to rob it, while Welborn waited outside as the lookout. Springsteen and Scott were tried separately, and each was found guilty, with Springsteen getting the death penalty, while Scott got 99 years in prison. Charges were dropped on both Pierce and Welborn due to a lack of evidence. The families of the victims finally felt they had some closure. It wasn't long, though, until problems began to appear. One issue was Detective Hector Polanco, who had gotten the original confession from Pierce. Turns out, he may have been too forceful, not only in this case, but in at least one more as well.
On October 24th, 1988, this used to be a Pizza Hut where Nancy DePriest used to work.
She was opening the store that day. She was a 20-year-old mother to a 15-month-old young girl. She showed up here first thing in the morning to open up the store. When her manager arrived here at 9:30 in the morning, she found the front door to the store locked. She unlocked it, went inside, and found Nancy laying on the ground with blood coming out of her head. She had been shot in the head. She was rushed to the hospital, where she later died.
She was found with a gunshot wound to the head. Police assumed someone who had the master key to the Pizza Hut restaurants had committed the murder. Richard Danziger and Christopher Ochoa were buddies who worked at another Pizza Hut in town. A few days after the murder, Danziger and Ochoa were seen by a waitress drinking a beer outside the restaurant. The men claimed they were doing a toast for DePriest, even though they had never met her. Both men were found guilty for taking part in the murder. However, several years later, Akeem Marino began to write letters to the district attorney's office as well as to George W. Bush, who was the governor of Texas at the time. He had information about the crime police hadn't released publicly. Eventually, through DNA testing, it was confirmed Marino had committed the rape and murder of DePriest. It turns out Detective Hector Planko had been one of the investigators who had interrogated Ochoa for several hours. Planko, along with other detectives, had given Ochoa information only police would know in the interrogation, and basically forced him into confessing. Also, Detective Robert Burns is seen on video at one point holding a gun to Mike Scott's head during his interrogation. Eventually, the convictions of Springsteen and Scott were both overturned because their confessions were used against each other in an improper fashion. Then in 2009, an unknown man's DNA was found on at least one of the girls. Prosecutors at the time were planning a retrial of Springsteen and Scott, but since neither one matched the unknown man's DNA, prosecutors decided not to move forward with the trials. No one has been charged in the girls' murders since. We're now at the cemetery, where 3 of the girls were laid to rest.
This will be Amy Lee Ayers, Sarah Louise Harbison, and Jennifer Ann Harbison.
We are now at the grave of Eliza Hope Thomas.
as well as her mother, Maria Rose Thomas.
It's so tragic and so sad to think about this case has not been solved yet.
Perhaps someone out there watching knows something. If you do, contact the Austin Police Department.